Come across a pattern paper and you're like, it's just gorgeous. It needs to be the star of the show. I don't want to be covering this up. Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have this piece of paper from the scrapbook.com Spooky Patterned Collection. It was one of my favorite papers. It is like, I guess, a little bit more on the creepy side of Halloween because it has the spiders and the coffins and, you know, ghost images, that kind of thing. But it's a really like elaborate, pretty patterned paper, and I want to take advantage of that. And so I am going to pair it with 6x8 paper busting template for slimline cards number 3. This is a new template and it works really, really well for this particular pattern paper. I'll show you how I'm going to cut it to make those complement each other, and I think in general it works for that kind of pattern paper where you have something you really want to highlight. But this is 6x8 paper busting template number 3. I have 2 other ones to share, but I've also released the 10-pack in my Etsy shop. So if you're like, yes, I really like 6x8 pattern paper, or it's really fun to make slimline cards, you can go grab that 10-pack now and get access to the 7 other templates that will be released over the next couple of months. So let's get started with cutting up this patterned paper today. And I noticed that the part of the pattern paper that I really like is actually down the center. If you look at the sketch, it shows you as cutting these 1.5 inch strips from one side and the 3x4 inch pieces from the other side. But we're just going to modify that, and instead we're going to cut 1.5 inches off of each side. So I have 6 inches wide. I'll cut 1.5 inches off this side, and then we'll save that 1.5 by 8 inch piece, and then do the same thing again. So we're cutting this down to 3 inches. And then this paper, since this image is sort of centered, where like they're, you know, they have the pumpkin in the middle and then the snakes on the 2 sides, or the skull in the middle and the ghost on the 2 sides, we're taking advantage of that. So we're gonna cut that down to 3x4. And then we have 2 pieces of that really pretty focal point stuff that we're going to use on our card. And then this one, you can choose to mix it up and just show the backs, but if you really want more of the pattern paper, you can keep using the fronts. We're gonna keep it really simple and cut some black cardstock for our cardstock mats. The cardstock mats can always be found right here on the sketch. So it says your 1.5 by 8 inch piece of paper needs a 1 3/4 by 8 1/4 inch mat. These are for slimline cards. So that means that, the use of slimline cards for me is going to be the 3.5 by 8.5 inch cards. They can be made with standard 8.5 by 11 cardstock, but they do leave a pretty sizable scrap left over when you make them that way. I have seen it in the past where you can purchase them. I just realized I did a terribly inefficient cutting of cardstock. What I would suggest you do is for those 1 3/4 inch pieces, you should cut them along the 8.5 inch side. So I'll use those for something else, but I do want to just kind of highlight how you can be more efficient with cardstock, even though that means I'm actually less efficient today. And so then I can cut it down to that 8 1/4 and do that again, and I'm left with a very small scrap. And we need another one for the second card. And then for our 3x4, we're gonna need a 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. Well, 8.5 divided by 2 is 4 1/4. So I cut it to 3 1/4, and then I'll cut it to 4 1/4. And while I do have this sizable chunk of cardstock left, that's great to use for something else. It's a very large scrap, very usable scrap, and then I have what I need with very little other waste for these 2 cards today. Now I also want to keep it super simple with, instead of adding any embellishment, because I want my pattern paper to be the star of the show, I'm just going to add a sentiment. Of course, you don't even need to do that if you don't want to, but I have a lot of great Halloween sentiments, and so I think I'm going to use this ghostly greetings to highlight the ghosts that you can see in each of them. And this is from the scrapbook.com Trick or Treat stamp set. Another thing that I like to do in these instances is to add a little, like, tie in some of the colors. So I've tied in the black with my cardstock mat. I think I want to highlight the fact that there's pink. And so I'm going to stamp this with some guava from Lawn Fawn. I do have all of my Lawn Fawn inks, which is like the only classic dye inks I own. I also have the Distress inks and Distress Oxide inks, but I just have the one line, and they're only the mini cubes of dye ink because I mostly use them for stamping sentiments, so it's kind of all that I need. And I did stamp out little samples of each. So I could go, oh, you know, this is pretty close to the pink that I want to highlight here. They will dry back a little bit, which is why it's nice to have a sample stamped for you so you can see what it looks like when it dries back, see its true color. And then we can attach these with some adhesive to our cardstock mats. If you were using a color that worked, so like say, I use a black cardstock mat. If you're doing a totally different theme, you might find that your sentiment could be cut from your cardstock mat, and that's a great way to save a little bit of cardstock versus like going to your, I mean, these are small, so it's a good use of a scrap pile too, but just always like to highlight those little things you can do. And so then I'm going to want to place this somewhere that I think kind of complements, doesn't, like, it's going to cover some of the design, but that highlights the parts of the design that I would like to, and I might make that choice differently for each of the two pieces of pattern paper because they are slightly different. So I want to emphasize the ghost, so maybe I would put it still in kind of the same place where I'm covering up the snakes, but it's just that's going to be a little bit higher on this one, or I could lower it, maybe come across the pumpkin or something like that, and then highlight these ghosts. So I kind of think about those things when I'm placing it down. I wouldn't just automatically place it at the bottom. I mean, it'd be fine, but it's going to cover the ghost there, so it's kind of like not my goal in this particular instance. Then I could assemble the cards according to the sketch, and then I'm really letting that patterned paper that I loved do its thing and not, you know, get overwhelmed by all those extra embellishments. It makes for a really quick card because there's only 2 pieces of paper on each card with some simple cardstock mats, which under the right circumstances you could skip if you don't really like doing cardstock mats. I did want to show it to you in another holiday. So this is from the scrapbook.com Peppermint Pattern Collection, which similarly is a 6x8 piece of paper that is really bold and pretty, and I wouldn't want to put a bunch of embellishment on top of it. And so I could make a very similar card for Christmas, and it helps me to use those bold patterned papers. You can find this template as the first link in the video description, but again, if you wanted to have all 10 of them right away, you could purchase them in the Etsy shop or wait for them to be released one by one for free here at my YouTube channel. Just be sure to subscribe. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community. Subscribe or click the bell so you don't miss the next template tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.